Queridos amigos, muy buenos días. Gracias por estar con nosotros en su programa Café con Leche, la voz de los latinos en América. Estamos transmitiendo desde hermosa 1470 AM, 96.9 FM. Les habla Lilia Galindo. Tengo en el teléfono a Thomas Elias. Y bueno, estamos tan cerca de la elección. Tom, good morning. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Good morning to you, Lily. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, I'm doing well. We are so nervous and excited for the election. It's so close now. How do you see it?
Yeah. Well, it's important to vote, even though in California the polls are very wide. The more votes Trump loses, the more votes go against him. If he should be elected, the less of a mandate he will have to do the crazy things he's talking about these days. But let's talk a little bit about the polls, since I just referred to the polls in California.
Okay.
The polls are actually they're very, very close right now. The latest poll, for instance, shows that the latest poll today is from Fox News. And Fox News is, of course, very Republican-oriented.
Mm-hmm.
So they today show Trump is ahead nationally 50% to 48%, 2% undecided. First of all, it's hard for me to understand how anybody could be undecided right now. These candidates are so different from one another, and their positions are so different from one another, and what they promise is so different from one another that it's very hard to imagine that anyone would have much trouble choosing. So I have yet to meet an undecided voter. I don't know about you. Maybe you can tell the audience, our audience, if you've met any undecided voter.
I don't know anybody. We are so decided since we start to talk about the election. Bueno, nos está hablando Thomas Elias de la importancia del voto para esta elección del 2024 y dice que nos habla de las encuestas, qué es lo que indican las encuestas. Según las encuestas, la de Fox, que es un canal totalmente republicano que ha apoyado mucho al expresidente Trump, dice que están muy cerradas los resultados. 50% van a votar, según ellos, están por el expresidente Trump y 48% por Kamala Harris, y que todavía hay un 2% que no han decidido. Y me preguntaba él si conozco a alguien que no haya decidido, y le digo que absolutamente a nadie. Para estas fechas ya hemos decidido qué clase de presidente queremos. Okay, you can continue now, please.
Okay. Well, now, so the Fox News poll says that that's a 4-point difference for Trump to be leading Harris by 2 points. 4-point difference means the last time they polled, they found that Harris was leading by 2 points. Now, assuming if the polls are generally not interviewing the same people every time they go out and ask questions, they pick a different sample every time. And so let's talk a little bit about how they choose their samples. They need to have what we learned in what I learned in graduate school, something called a stratified random sample. That is, you want people in a certain income bracket, say between $50,000 and $75,000 a year. You need a certain number of people in that bracket, and in your poll, certain percentage of the people that you're talking to. And so once you decide that, then you can randomly choose among people with that income bracket. But how do you know that people have that income bracket? People keep their income secret. So the polls are a little flawed, and even you get the problem that a lot of people won't talk to the pollsters. And there's a third problem. A lot of people lie to the pollsters. For instance, you may remember back in 1982, it's more than 40 years ago, when Tom Bradley, then the mayor of Los Angeles, ran for governor. All the polls showed he was going to win that election, and pretty easily, but he lost it. And one of the reasons why is that people lied to the pollsters. They didn't want to tell someone that they would refuse to vote for a black man, no matter what. And there were a lot of people who just wouldn't do it. So Tom Bradley lost, and the polls were wrong. Now, the polls, the last couple of presidential elections have been very wrong. For instance, in 2016, Hillary Clinton led all the polls, and she won the national popular vote. But in the swing states of Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio was a swing state at that time, and North Carolina was also a swing state at that time. A lot of people just would not vote for a woman, but they didn't want to tell a pollster that. And as a result, Hillary Clinton lost the election, even though she won the polls. And the polls don't count. The only poll that really counts is the one at the ballot box, not the one when somebody calls you on the phone. Now, a lot of these polls in different states, in the swing states, we hear a lot about the polls in the swing states, they seem a little crazy. For instance, in Michigan, we have a Senate race, and the Democrat Elias Slotkin, in a poll this morning from an outfit called Mitchell Research, which is another Republican-oriented polling firm, shows the Democrat Elias Slotkin is ahead by 4 points, and her Republican opponent is down by the same 4 points, by a margin of 47% to 43%, with a few undecideds. That's about where that race has stood in just about every poll. And yet, in the voting for president in that state, Trump is said to be leading by the same pollster. Trump is said to be leading by 1 percentage point. Now, here's the thing you don't understand. In a state the size of Michigan, a company like Mitchell Research was not a terribly rich company, and they're not polling for any newspapers, so they don't have all that money to spend on their poll, all that much money to spend on their poll. They're not interviewing more than about 300 voters. And if 1 or 2 people switch or 1 or 2 people lie, then the poll has a completely different result. And that's a very fragile poll. That doesn't tell you much. So in Michigan, everything depends on who goes out to vote. How many people get turned out to vote? It's the same thing in Georgia. Now, we have these polls in Georgia that are consistently showing that Trump is leading by 4 or 5 points. But yesterday was the first day of voting in early voting in the state of Georgia. And last year, about 20,000 people, the last time, about 20,000 people turned out to vote on the first day of early voting in Georgia. Well, yesterday, 385,000 people came out. Now, we don't know how they voted because those results haven't been announced, and they won't be announced until Election Day on November 5th. But when you get a heavy turnout, in most places, it usually is good for the Democrats. And that's a very, very heavy turnout. That's about 16 times as many people voting as voted 4 years ago at the same occasion in the state of Georgia. So maybe the polls in Georgia are completely wrong. And they've been wrong in the past few years. Here's another aspect to think. Well, I'll stop there.
Thank you. Ok, fíjense, nos está hablando de lo que son las encuestas. Y dice, yo como aprendí de las encuestas era que había que estratificar la población, o sea, localizar personas que fueran más o menos del mismo ingreso, que vivieran en las mismas condiciones, para que ellos fueran los que se tomaran en consideración en la encuesta. Pero la verdad es que no, dice, por varias situaciones. En primer lugar, ¿cómo saben cuál es el ingreso de cada quien? En segundo lugar, las personas a veces mienten porque no quieren confesar por quién van a votar. Dice, por ejemplo, en la elección de 1982, donde Tom Bradley, que era el alcalde de Los Ángeles, corrió para gobernador, según las encuestas, él iba a ganar absolutamente y resulta que perdió. Dice, pero porque muchas gentes mienten porque no querían confesar que no iban a votar por una persona de origen negro para que fuese gobernador. Así es que dice, ahora en la elección presidencial del 2016, el voto popular se supone que iba a ganar, pero hubo varias modificaciones y se supone que Hillary Clinton iba a ganar según ahí las encuestas, pero en realidad muchas personas no querían confesar que no iban a votar por una mujer para que fuera presidenta. Por ejemplo, ahora en Michigan, el que está corriendo para el Senado aparece con una ventaja de 4%, pero y el republicano de menos 4%, pero según para Donald Trump, él aparece con una ventaja de un 1%, aunque esta compañía que realizó la encuesta es muy pequeña y solamente hace su encuesta con solamente 300 votantes. Entonces, esos no reflejan en realidad qué es lo que va a pasar el día de la elección. En el estado de Georgia, pues también en las elecciones pasadas, en el primer día de la elección salieron a votar 20,000 personas. Ahora en la elección esta que se está dando, el día de ayer, que fue el primer día de votación, salieron a votar 385,000 personas. Quiere decir que muchas veces más que lo que ocurrió. Dice, generalmente cuando hay un voto temprano, generalmente van a ser demócratas los que salgan a votar, pero ya veremos los resultados en las elecciones. Now you can continue, please.
Okay, so the polls have rarely been as wrong as they were 4 years ago when Joe Biden won the election. Mm-hmm. Going into election day, the average among all the polls showed that Biden was 12 points ahead in the national vote. He won the national vote all right, but he only won it by 2.5%.
Wow.
Now that means the polls were off by 10 points, and they were off by even more in some of the states that Biden eventually won by a very, very narrow margin. And this difference in the polls is one of the reasons why Trump has been running around ever since saying he was cheated. And why a lot of people believe him. 70% of the people who support Trump think he was cheated 4 years ago. Well, so now the polls, seeing this result, they're not going to just sit there and do the same thing over again. They're going to change their sample, and they're going to try and make their sample more Republican than it was the last time. So the question is, are they making it too Republican this time? Too much more swinging to the other side? We don't know the answer to that, and we probably won't know the answer to that until 2 weeks after the actual election day, when all the votes are counted, because a lot of the absentee ballots, the mail-in ballots, won't get counted until at least 2 weeks after the election, some of them maybe a month after the election. We may not know who the next president is until the 1st of December or thereabouts, wow. By the way. There's a lot to think about. And the more you hear about the polls, the more skeptical you need to be. And always remember that it's your vote that counts. It's not some poll person, poll taker. And that the more actual ballots are cast, the more honest the election is going to be.
Okay. Simplemente para recordarles que en la encuesta pasada, cuando ganó el presidente Biden, se supone que las encuestas decían que iba a ganar por un 12% y ganó solamente por el 2,5%. Dice, por eso el expresidente Trump aprovechó esto para decir que le hicieron trampa. Así es que lo único que vale la pena es que salgamos a votar y no preocuparnos tanto por las encuestas, salgamos a votar y votemos para que este país pueda continuar adelante. Thank you very much, Tom. It was a pleasure to talk to you. Hasta la vista. Bye-bye.
But I just want people to know they should be very skeptical of the polls when you hear about them.
No hagan atención no pongan atención a las encuestas tanto porque no son tan válidas. Gracias, thank you, bye.
Okay, gracias,
nos vemos.
Bye-bye.
Hasta mañana, bye.